All right, welcome everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating piece of text, 2 Chronicles chapter 9. It paints this picture of, well, almost unbelievable wealth and wisdom.
It really does. And the centerpiece, of course, is that legendary visit. The Queen of Sheba coming to see King Solomon in Jerusalem. It's one of those moments in the record that really stands out.
And it wasn't just a friendly visit, was it? The text is pretty clear. She had an agenda. She came specifically to test him with hard questions. She'd heard about him, obviously, but needed proof.
Exactly. It wasn't like she was just dropping in. She'd heard the reports back home about his fame, his wisdom, all of it. And she came to, verify, put it to the test herself.
And she arrived in style, apparently. A very great caravan, the text says. Camels, spices, lots of gold, precious stones. This was a serious diplomatic mission.
Absolutely. It shows the level of importance, right? The resources involved signal this wasn't a minor kingdom visiting. And she wasn't shy either. Talked with him about all she had on her mind, laid it all out there.
So the big question, how did Solomon do on this test?
According to this account, he aced it completely. The text says Solomon answered all her questions. And it makes this point, which is crucial. Nothing was too hard for him to explain to her.
Nothing at all. That's quite a statement.
It is. It emphasizes the sheer breadth and depth of his understanding. Whatever she came up with, he had an answer.
Okay, so his wisdom is confirmed through the Q&A, but it says she was overwhelmed. It sounds like it was more than just his smart answers. What else got to her?
Right, this is key. It wasn't just intellectual. It was seeing the wisdom in action manifested in the kingdom itself. The physical reality. The text lists specific things. The palace he had built, for
The
instance.
scale of it, you mean?
The scale, the grandeur, yeah.
Hmm.
And the food on his table, the abundance, maybe the variety. The organization, too, how his officials were seated, the servants attending, their robes.
Detail.
Exactly, the details, even the cupbearers and their robes. And it mentions the burnt offerings he made at the temple. It was the whole system, the whole picture of a kingdom running with incredible splendor and order.
It sounds like a sensory overload, almost. The combination of brilliance and just sheer stuff. Magnificent stuff.
Pretty much. It was the total package. Wisdom, wealth, organization, even religious practice, all operating at this peak level.
So how did she react? What did she actually say after seeing all this?
Well, her reaction is basically the ultimate endorsement. She says, the reports I heard back home, they were true. But then she goes further. She says, indeed, not even half the greatness of your wisdom was told me. You have far exceeded the report I heard.
Not even half. That's huge. It suggests the reality was just staggering compared to even the most glowing rumors.
It really does. It frames the reports as almost understatements. And she didn't stop at praising Solomon himself.
Right, she talks about his people too.
Yeah, she mentions how happy his men and officials must be, getting to hear his wisdom all the time. But then, importantly, she connects it all back to God. She praised the Lord your God, saying,
wow.
God delighted in you and placed you on his throne as king to rule for the Lord your God. She explicitly links his rule to God's love for Israel and this divine purpose, maintaining justice and righteousness.
So, in her eyes, this wasn't just Solomon being amazing on his own. It was a sign of divine blessing, God working through him for the nation. That adds a whole other layer.
Absolutely. It elevates the whole encounter beyond just a meeting of monarchs. And then, naturally, there's the gift exchange.
Ah, yes, the famous gifts. She gave him quite a bit, didn't she?
Oh, yeah. 120 talents of gold. Huge amount.
Correct.
Plus, large quantities of spices and precious stones. And the text throws in this little detail about the spices.
What was that?
It says, there had never been such spices as those the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon, suggesting they were exceptionally rare or fine, like top-tier stuff, even for a king.
120 talents of gold. That's, what, thousands of kilos. I mean, that's an immense fortune just in that one gift.
Truly staggering. And Solomon's response is interesting, too. He gave her all she desired and asked for. Standard royal generosity, maybe? But then it adds, he gave her more than she had brought to him.
More. So he outgifted her.
Seems like it. A display of his own vast resources, perhaps? Or just showing he could meet and exceed even her level of generosity. A power move, maybe, but also part of that royal persona.
Interesting. And after that, she heads home.
Yep. She and her retinue departed, went back to her country. Her visit kind of serves as this incredible opening testimony, validating everything that the rest of the chapter then describes in almost overwhelming detail.
Okay, so the queen confirms the legend. Now, the chapter hits us with the numbers, the evidence, The sheer scale of Solomon's wealth, where does it start? The gold income.
Right. It gives a specific figure. 666 talents of gold received yearly. And it's careful to note this doesn't include other revenue streams like merchants, traders, kings of Arabia, regional governors.
So that 666 talents is just part of the income, like a base amount.
Seems like it, possibly tribute or taxes from certain areas. And 666 talents, depending on the exact weight, that's easily over 20, maybe 25 tons of gold every year, just from that one source.
Wow. Okay. That number, 666, obviously catches the eye for other reasons today. But here it's just presented as a fact, a measure of income.
Purely quantitative in this context, yeah. And it wasn't just piling up. He used it. The chapter talks about these golden shields he had made.
Right, the ceremonial shields.
Seems likely. 200 large ones, hammered gold, 600 bekas each, and then 300 smaller shields, 300 bekas of gold each.
A beak is not huge, but multiply that out.
Yeah.
Hundreds of shields. That's a lot of gold just for display pieces. Where did he keep them?
In the Palace of the Forest of Lebanon, one of his major buildings, probably named for all the cedar used in it.
It really drives home the point. Wealth so immense, it's used for decoration on a massive scale. And then there's his throne. The description is just wild.
Oh, the throne is something else. Ivory, overlaid with pure gold. 6 steps leading up to it, a gold footstool. Armrests. And get this, a lion standing beside each armrest.
Lions, okay. Symbols of royalty, power.
But wait, there's more. On the steps themselves, 12 lions stood on the 6 steps, one at either end of each step. So 6 pairs of lions lining the way up.
12 golden lions guarding the steps to his ivory and gold throne. That is an image.
It really is. And the text makes a point of saying nothing like it had ever been made for any other kingdom. Explicitly unique, unparalleled.
That claim really hammers home the chronicler's message about Solomon's exceptional status. But it wasn't just the big showstopper items, right? What about, like, everyday stuff? This is where it gets really strange to modern ears.
Right. This detail always jumps out. All his drinking cups, his goblets, pure gold, all the household items in that Palace of the Forest of Lebanon, pure gold.
Okay, lavish. But then comes the kicker.
Then comes the line. Nothing was made of silver because silver was considered of little value in Solomon's day.
Silver, of little value. Silver, which was, actual money, a primary precious metal everywhere else. To just dismiss it like that.
It implies such an insane superabundance of gold that it completely skewed the normal value of precious metals.
Yeah.
It suggests gold was so common in his court, or at least available to him, that silver just didn't impress anyone anymore. Like you said, mind-boggling.
It really forces you to rethink what rich even meant in that context. It's a different economic universe.
It is. And this wasn't just passive wealth piling up from tribute. The text points to his trade network, too. He was actively generating wealth.
Yeah, the fleet he had with Hiram's guys. What did they bring back?
These ships went on 3-year voyages, long trips, and they came back with gold, silver, and ivory, and apes and baboons.
Gold and silver, okay, more wealth. But ivory, apes, baboons, exotic luxury goods. Showing the reach of his trade routes, right? Far-flung places.
Exactly. Trade, tribute, gifts like the queen's.
Yeah.
It all funneled into Jerusalem. And this wasn't just for palaces and goblets. It supported his military, too.
Right, the chariots and horses.
Yep. 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots and 12,000 horses. Huge numbers. Stationed in special chariot cities and also in Jerusalem. And the horses themselves were imported from Egypt and other places. Sophisticated logistics were needed for that.
Everything about this account is just massive.
Yeah.
The scale is consistent. And it wasn't just concentrated in the palace, was it? The text implies a wider impact.
It does. It repeats that point about silver being as common in Jerusalem as stones. Hard to literally believe, maybe, but it emphasizes the point about abundance in the capital. And more practically, perhaps, he made cedar as plentiful as sycamore fig trees in the foothills.
Meaning valuable timber for building became cheap, readily available.
That seems to be the implication, which would fuel more construction, more signs of prosperity. It paints a picture of the whole kingdom, or at least the core region, benefiting from this influx.
So summing it all up, how does the text rank Solomon compared to other rulers?
Unequivocally, King Solomon was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings of the earth. Full stop.
And that wisdom, it wasn't just something he had, it was something others actively sought out.
Absolutely. Kings came from everywhere, all the kings of the earth, the text says, specifically to hear the wisdom God had put in his heart. It was the primary draw, it seems.
Not just for alliances or trade, but to hear him.
That's how it's framed here. And, naturally, when these kings visited, they brought gifts Annual tribute, maybe? Articles of silver, gold, robes, weapons, spices, horses, mules.
So it becomes this self-reinforcing cycle. God gives wisdom, wisdom attracts kings, kings bring wealth, wealth funds splendor, splendor enhances fame, fame attracts more kings.
Something like that, yeah. A virtuous cycle, fueled initially by that divine gift of wisdom. And his influence was geographically wide, too.
How far did his kingdom stretch, according to this?
Over all the kings from the river, usually meaning the Euphrates, down to the land of the Philistines as far as the border of Egypt, a pretty significant sphere of influence for that time, and he reigned over all Israel from Jerusalem for 40 years.
Okay, and the chapter ends by pointing to other records.
Yeah, it mentions the chronicles of Nathan the prophet, Aiah the Shilonite, Iddo the seer, suggesting there was more information available elsewhere. Then it notes his death and his son Rehoboam taking the throne.
Bringing this specific focus on his peak glory to a close.
Exactly. It's like a snapshot of the zenith, validated by the queen and detailed with all this material evidence.
So, thinking about this deep dive into chapter 9, these descriptions are just so vivid, almost overwhelming. What does it tell us about how they saw wealth and power back then? It feels very different from today.
I think it shows how tightly connected everything was. Wealth wasn't just money. It was a sign of power, yes, but also of divine favor, of blessing. The sheer amount of gold making silver seem cheap. The unique throne. These aren't just economic data points. They're presented as proof of Solomon's special status, his unique relationship with God.
Right? It wasn't just that he was smart and rich. It was that God made him smart, which led to the riches and influence. The source was seen as divine.
Precisely. It challenges our modern way of often separating, the spiritual or intellectual from the material.
Mhm.
Here, they are deeply, deeply intertwined. The outer splendor reflects the inner God-given wisdom.
Yeah. Seeing those details like the lions on the steps or the dismissal of silver, it really makes the story concrete, doesn't it? You can almost picture it, even though the scale is hard to grasp. It moves beyond just Solomon was wise and wealthy.
It grounds it. It gives you these specific, almost tangible examples, even if they describe an opulence that feels almost mythical to us. It's a window into what mattered, what symbolized greatness in that world.
Definitely leaves you thinking about how different their perspective must have been.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this look at 2 Chronicles 9 has certainly given us a picture of Solomon's fame, confirmed by an initially skeptical queen, and then backed up by these incredible details of wealth and wisdom.
Yeah, we've seen that overwhelming impact of his wisdom combined with the kingdom's splendor, the huge gifts exchanged, and just the staggering scale of it all. Gold, military, trade, everything.
So as a final thought for you to consider, the text keeps coming back to this idea. The wisdom God had put in his heart was the ultimate source of Solomon's unique standing. Think about that divine connection. How does framing it that way, as the text does, shape the whole story of his power and influence? Maybe differently than if we just focused on the gold and the chariots. It's something to chew on.